going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. My name is Miko, joined once again by my guy Morgan Cannon, and this is your go-to place for all things Lions related. That includes news, updates, analysis, and so much more. If you are looking for more additional Lions content, you can always check out the Pride of Detroit website. There's a lot of articles that are really well written and obviously getting a lot of information into what this team is doing, especially during the offseason when there's a little bit of a lull at times, Morgan, but then there's always a bit of news here and there or just some additional insight. So if you're looking for that type of stuff, the POD website is your go-to place. Also, if this is your first time checking out the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel, definitely hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. That makes it a lot easier for you to find our content or, again, be notified whenever we go live or do anything like that. So in today's video specifically, Morgan, we've been talking a ton of free agency, and rightfully so, right? Free agency kicked off a couple weeks ago, and that took the front seat for the last couple of videos that we've been doing, and even a lot of the live streams we've been doing, whether it's reacting to signings, whether it's grading signings, whatever the case may be. Free agency has definitely taken the front seat, but I think it's a good opportunity for us to put it at least in the passenger seat. We're not going to necessarily put it in the back seat. We'll put it in the passenger seat and get back to talking a little bit about the NFL draft, because that's still quickly approaching. And while free agency is a big part of the offseason, the draft is the other side of that coin when it comes down to teams filling out their roster and improving, right?
Yeah, for sure. And for a team like the Lions, who we've talked over and over again, they're established championship contenders, however you want to phrase it. The draft's always going to be the bigger side of that coin. You know what I mean? Like, just with how rosters are constructed these days, we beat that point to, we beat it up. But yeah, like the draft is, we know that's where Brad Holmes makes his money. That's where a lot of these really, sharp GMs that have built some really, really strong rosters make their money. So yeah, what are we we're like a month out now, I want to say, right? Today's the 20th.
I would say so. Listen, I'm gonna be honest with you. It seems like the offseason is kind of just blurred together. I feel like in some senses we're further ahead in the offseason than I thought we were. And there's other times where I feel like we're further behind, especially when it comes to things like the draft. I don't even think we've started to hear about visits or anything like that. And so we still got a good ways, to your point, of when it comes down to this draft season. But with that said, there does come another big part of draft season, which is mock drafts. And whether you love them, whether you hate them, there's a lot of them. There's no denying that there's a lot of people out there, a lot of draft analysts out there that are willing and ready to give their opinion on who they believe, X team is going to draft. And the Lions are obviously one of those teams as well. And this is where I think, Morgan, again, having such a fully fleshed out staff over here at POD really helps out, because you and I don't have time to go be able to, keep track of all these mock drafts. But luckily, Eric has that type of time on hand and is able to kind of compile all of this information kind of for us.
Yeah, and I love that Eric does that. I want to say it drops every Sunday. And so we're going to work off that a bit. But he goes around and he pulls all the mock drafts. I think it was the 8.0 version, I want to say. Yeah. This one is. Yeah, but people love mocks, man. They really, really do. I get it. I was that for a long time, coming up as a teenager when the Lions were bad every year, just because it was easier, man. When you're picking top 10,
I was going to say, it's so much easier to kind of get a grasp of who's going to be available to you.
Bro, night and day. And we're it just, people ask me, and I'll see them in person. They know, what I write about and how closely I follow the Lions of who you think we're taking in the draft? I'm I don't know, dog. We picked 28.
I have no, that there's so much that's going to possibly happen. And that's why I said, I think it's awesome that Eric is able to kind of put this, mock draft roundup that you guys can go find over on prideofdetroit.com, where he compiles all the players that are being picked and also attributes the writers or the analysts that have made those selections, so you can kind of see how popular a player is. And like Morgan said, that's kind of what we're going to work off of. But we're not just going to run through Eric's article, because that would again rob you guys of the opportunity to read the amazing things that he's written and the insight that he's given. But we are going to at least work off of it. So with that said, Morgan, let's kind of kick things off here. When you look at, the mock drafts that have been compiled over this past week and a bit, where do you see, or who do you see as probably the best value pick for the Lions amongst the guys that have been kind of mocked to the Lions at this point?
Really, any of the edge rushers, just because, in my opinion, there's a surplus of talent at edge and defensive tackle, really. I want to say there's 6 guys that are pretty consistently, if you look at all the different draft pundits around the country or the world, there's 6 that are firmly in that top 30 range. I think there's like 4 defensive tackles that are firmly in that top 30 range. So when you look at that, I think that's where the value comes from, because there are going to be other teams that are going to be looking for a quarterback or for an offensive tackle or receivers. And I think that's when some of those players can get pushed down and obviously, push some like good talent down to the Lions, hopefully at 28. So that's kind of where I think, obviously, there's always value in taking an offensive lineman too, man. I know people won't want to hear that. Shoot, I'd be happy with the Lions taking an offensive lineman at 28. What about you?
I'm actually surprised that you didn't say offensive lineman first, because that's what I fully expected you to come on here and be like offensive line, because that's just where the talent's probably going to be once you get later in the first round. And you're right. Like, that's typically, I think, where you can find good value if you're picking in the later 20s, is that you're more than likely getting guys. Again, not saying that they're not talented, but, interior offensive linemen aren't always seen as a premium position. So you start to see those guys start to kind of matriculate down. And that would fit a need that the Lions definitely have. For me, I do think it's more so on the defensive side, but oddly enough, and this probably might make people mad as well or just frustrate them, I think it's on the defensive tackle side. Because to your point, I think edge rushers, as deep as this class is, I still think people are going to clamor to get a young pass rusher if they can. And so while even looking at, Eric's list, he has 6 guys listed that are being mocked to the Lions. There's a good chance that all 6 of those guys go before the Lions pick at 28. And so if you're not able to get a premier pass rusher on the edge, why not get like, a stout pass rusher or a good cog in the middle on the defensive line? And that's where like Derek Harmon kind of stands out to me. I think if you're able to get someone like him fall to you at 28, that's amazing value. It's not the premier pass rusher that you want on the edge, but he's somebody that can definitely push the pocket from the middle, has great size, has great athleticism, and also can probably have some versatility in being able to play that big edge as well. So that's at least someone that I look at where if the Lions could get a player like him, that's amazing value at 28.
Yeah, I would love Derek Harmon at 28, because you're just adding him to a room that's already super talented. You think about when that room gets fully healthy, like we don't know when Aleem's going to be available, but when he is, man, like think about that little rotation. You got Aleem, DJ Reader, Makai Wingo, Levi Onzarike, Derek Harmon. Like you can roll some dudes in there now. Like that's what I'm talking about. And that's the worst pressure. We've said that time and again too. That pressure right up the middle. That's the tough stuff to deal with, man. Like if you got a game wrecker or two in the middle there, and then you have an edge rusher, like a premium edge rusher like Aiden Hutchinson, that's where we could see this defense reach some pretty cool heights in 2025, and perhaps the team as a whole. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I'm right there with you. We could label it as the trenches in general if we wanted to, because but like the value is going to be good either way there, because there's a bunch of guards, there's a good amount of tackles. So really, if you guys want to focus on the trenches as like a good value add at 28, I think that would be a good place to start, because I think there's going to be options. Quarterbacks are going to get drafted. The Jackson Dart kid's going to get taken. The old guy from, where's he from? He's like 24 or 25. I don't hate to say
it. The kid from like Texas?
I can't remember his name. I was listening to I don't look at quarterbacks because we don't need to. But yeah, guys going that early are going to push. Like that's what we should be rooting for. Like now that, I remember last year, every time something like a quarterback went early or a receiver, I'm like, yeah, we were there together. We were Ford Field, and we were like just pushing people down. And then what do you know? We end up with Terrion Arnold, who most people were like, we didn't have a shot, at drafting because he's going to be gone. So that's kind of what I'm going to be hoping for, because if the Lions can land a Derek Harmon or a Shamar Stewart or someone like that because they get pushed down, dream scenario for sure.
Especially with players like that, like you mentioned Shamar Stewart, or even again a guy like Derek Harmon, where like again their numbers don't necessarily pop off, but they have all the physical tools, and you can at least see how they would fit into a system like what the Lions have. I think that's where, like, I agree with you. You're definitely rooting for those types of things. Hey, draft as many running backs as you can, draft as many receivers as you can. Hopefully corners, are a premium in the first round. Anything that can help you push down some of those players in the trenches on either side, I think is a good win for the Lions.
The kid from Georgia, Michael Williams, would love that. That would get me hot and bothered. Oh boy.
That's another one, right? And he's someone that's been a little like, people have run hot and cold on him. You see some people that are talking about him as a top 10, top 15 pick, and then you have other people that are like, yeah, he may be bottom of the first round because of, again, a similar situation as Shamar Stewart, where the production just wasn't quite there.
Yeah, and I get that. I like, but then I point to it, man. Y'all know how them Georgia defenses are, right? So they're rotating. He's playing that
Yes.
big end position. It's that defense as a whole is a monster. So you kind of, I know it's tough because at some point you got to see the production from an edge rusher because that's what really matters. But if you're drafting him to be your Aiden Hutchinson right away, then yeah, I think you could get in a little bit of trouble. But with the Lions, like I don't know, you're just if we got Michael Williams, then he's splitting time with Davenport and Paschal and everybody, and that's where you can under just like a really awesome coaching staff that has shown they can develop. So that'd be fine with me, man, because I hope teams are turned off by the production. We'll take them in Detroit, baby. Go ahead.
Exactly. You still got, as NFL coaches, their job is still to be able to coach and develop. So that's, again, if you're going to push a player like that down or take him off your board or push him further down your board, Detroit's going to would absolutely love for that to happen. Taking a look at the rest of this list though, Morgan, is there anyone that like jumped out at you that's a little bit of a surprise that you're like, I can't believe that person's actually even being mocked to the Lions, or a position that you're like, I can't believe this is being mocked to the Lions?
Man, there's a couple receivers, and not in the first round, just because there's a lot of mouths to feed, bro. We were talking
Yeah.
about it before we got on here. You're going to have Jameer, who's going to be up for, like, people are going to peg him as Offensive Player of the Year. There's probably going to be some people that are going to peg him in, like, MVP conversations. And it's right. The man had 2,000 yards from scrimmage and
Yeah.
20 touchdowns last year. So, he gets his touches. Jameer, David Montgomery, Amon-Ra, Laporta, Jameson. Like, there's just a lot of mouths to feed. I could see them taking a receiver a little bit later, maybe developing that receiver to, like, fill out the X role in the future. But in the first, I just don't really see the value. And I know Brad drafts like who he likes the most, but I feel like there's a limit on that to a certain point, right? Because yeah,
You
I
can't
don't
love,
know.
yeah, there's no way there's a receiver you love that much where you're like, I have to add this to the offense. And not to mention, the offense, like you said, is fairly set when you start talking about all of the different playmakers you have at literally every position: receiver, tight end, running back. Your quarterback's playing well. You could obviously definitely, bolster your offensive line some, which you and I are both in favor of. But taking another receiver or any skill position would feel very much like a luxury when you really don't have an area to kind of fit that person in. I
Yeah.
know for me personally, it's a position that the Lions need, but I am a little surprised to still see James Pierce being mocked to the Lions. And it's really for the character concerns. There's a lot of teams that preach that type of stuff, that talk about character being a big deal, or that the player evaluation, the person evaluation being a big part of what they do during the draft process. The Lions are a team that I wholeheartedly believe in. Like, they are the organization that I believe is 10 toes down when they talk about your character matters, even probably more so than your tape does. And I think that's very much the case when you talk about a guy like James Pierce, where it's no secret that there's been a lot of chatter about the type of teammate he was, about the type of work ethic he has, as well as just, like, again, the type of person he was on campus. So if you can't even check the box on the character standpoint, I just feel like this team is going to look at you like, they don't care how good you are at rushing the passer, which he is very good at. He was very prolific at in Tennessee. It just wouldn't shock me that they would kind of pass on him because he just doesn't quite fit what they are looking for from a character perspective.
Yeah, I'm right. Like the on-field stuff, no doubt. Like he had a 23% pass rush win rate, which is the highest of like that first tier of like edge rushers. 45. I don't know, man. I don't see it. Like you said, we highlighted all the off the field stuff. They re-signed Derek Barnes, which is where I think Pierce would, like, if you were to force me to draft Pierce, I think he'd be at that kind of Sam role in like a 5-man front, depending on what the Lions deploy. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't see that one. Not for the Lions. Think about, when was it when Dan Campbell said a couple years ago, and he's like, we don't want any turds here, man. So
Right.
I don't know. I don't see it, bro, man.
Yeah, and while I think the roster is getting more mature and maybe you could afford to have some veterans be able to check some guys, I still don't think the Lions are quite at the point yet where, especially at a position like that, where you can afford to have a guy that you just are going to be concerned about getting into trouble. And that's kind of the other thing about it. Not to mention, you talk about him probably fitting more into the Derek Barnes role. That's another reason why I don't think he quite fits into the Lions. I think he probably would fit more in a 3-4 system where he gets to be just a straight up stand up outside pass rusher and gets to play some linebacker duties, but isn't just solely, not really like a hand in the dirt kind of guy.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to watch more of his tape, to be honest. I haven't watched a ton just because I don't think he's really a possibility. But yeah, I just don't. It's not something I see. And I do agree with you. I think the Lions are in a position right now, like, say there was a player with some red flags, like
Mm-hmm.
off the field stuff, whatever. I think they can deal with that. But if your football character is being put into question, I think that's a hard no for them. Like, you don't work hard in the building. Like, teammates don't really like you. Like, I know it's a polarizing discussion. I think
Yeah.
those are red flags where I could see them being like, nah, man. Like, other ones for sure, like, oh, he's a little hot headed. You gotta kind of rein him in on game day. Dan Campbell's probably like, I can work with that. Bring him in. You know what I'm saying? But
Right.
the other stuff that we just talked about, I don't think so. What do you think?
Yeah, I think if there's ever a situation, and these are speculative like stories that have been out about James Pierce, but like supposedly that's one of the reasons why like his snap count was fairly low. It's just like he just didn't get along well with coaches and teammates, so they like that was their way of punishing him. Obviously, he's too good of a football player to just not play, but they were just like, we're not going to give you the courtesy of being able to play a ton, and so it's those little things. There's that I think, like I said, I think the Lions would kind of take that as a reason to not have him on their board, no matter how big the need is at the position.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Like, even maybe if they weren't able to re-sign Derek Barnes, they're having a little bit more of a close look at him. But yeah, it's just not something. I could be wrong. We both could be wrong, but we've
Well,
we've
yeah.
we've had enough of a sample size with the way Brad and Dan operate since they've been here. I mean, JMO had some, like, I'm sure there was some stuff around Jameson coming out, like he had the injury,
Mm-hmm.
bounced from Ohio State that one year, but like that's a completely different set of circumstances than what we're hearing about this guy because JMO got ejected for targeting on a punt. Like, those are the
Right.
problems. Those are the problems the Lions are like, that's okay. We can work with that. We
We
can
can
work
rein
with
that
that.
in. We can teach you not to target people on punt coverage or just not put you on punt coverage.
Yeah, those are the things I think they can deal with, and like stuff like, but yeah, some of this stuff like you're not working hard, you're being a turd of a teammate. Nah, man, I don't see it for
Yeah,
sure.
I'm with you on that one. Speaking of edge, this is a position that clearly not just fans think is a big need. It's something that also draft analysts clearly have pegged as like the number one need for the Lions. Of the 20, like of all of the draft analysts that Eric covered in his roundup, 23 of them have the Lions picking some edge, right? At some point in the first round. Even with that heavy of a belief that this is the position that the Lions should be addressing in the first round, how likely is it, do you think, that the Lions probably pass on edge and maybe look at another position, whether it be, defensive tackle, offensive line, maybe Jahad Campbell falls? Like, how likely do you think it is that the Lions would deviate from such a big need that is fairly obvious and pick a different position?
I think y'all should buckle up, man. I think it's a pretty good chance. I think people are going to get mad in the comments, but hear me out. Me and Miko are not arguing that edge is not the biggest need because
Mm-hmm.
I think just like most of y'all going to be watching this video, like it's going to be that guy opposite Hutchinson. We're right there with you. Like, if we could wave our magic wand and someone's sitting there at 28, that's a perfect fit in terms
Mm-hmm.
of like value and like where Brad has him on the board. That would be the most ideal situation. You know what I mean? Like, if the Lions really, really, really love Shamar Stewart and he makes it to 28, great. If they really love the Georgia kid, Michael Williams, great. But I do think fans need to be prepped. Like, if, maybe there is an edge that fans really like still on the board at 28, but the Lions are like, whoa, we really love this offensive lineman, or,
Yeah.
what have you. So I think that's something like we saw it last year, guys. Like, everyone wanted them to like in the Gibbs draft, like people were talking this and that, and they went running back, linebacker, and a lot of people were like, what did the Lions just do? And then turns out, well, they kind of knew what they were doing. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think it's a pretty good shot. Like, ideally, like, I just want to say it one more time, me and Miko agree with all of y'all down in the
Yes.
comments yelling at us. Edge is obviously the biggest need. I would love to upgrade that position headed, like, into September of this year, but it's got to match up, because if you start drafting, like those, that's what bad GMs do, man. You go into a
Yes.
draft like, we need an edge. okay, well, we're not going to take this guard who we have like at 14th on our board. We're going to take this edge rusher because we need an edge, but he's like fucking on our board. That's bad juju, man. That's not good value, right, Miko?
Absolutely. And I think like another way of thinking about it, again, playing off of Eric's mock draft roundup, like I said, there's about 6 guys that they have listed as a possible selection for the Lions. I think there's a good chance, Morgan, where like all 6 of these guys could get picked before the Lions ever get a chance to pick at 28. And so if you think like these 6 guys are all like no brainer first round talent, okay, well, what happens when all 6 guys go? Do you reach for a guy that you have a second round grade on? And I think that goes lines up with what you're saying. If you have a position, whether it's tackle or guard, or defensive tackle, that you're like, hey, we actually have these players rated higher than our next edge prospect. Take that guy that you already have evaluated and is a good football player and that can still provide value to your team. And then just, again, like we've said so many times when talking about the draft, this is a deep edge class. Maybe you can get one of those guys in the second round, or whatever the case may be, or maybe you can, hell, trade back, do whatever you need to do, but don't feel compelled, like you're saying, to reach for a player that you haven't rated really highly. So I'm right there with you. I think it's fairly high that the Lions could draft a different position, and I don't necessarily think it's because it's going to be like someone like a Michael Williams or a Shamar Stewart or even the Mike Green or even the kid out of Boston College. Like I'm not saying that they would overlook those guys to take a different position, but I do think if those guys aren't there, you really get into a situation where the Lions might take a different position that they just have valued a little bit higher.
Yeah, and that's why these teams organize their draft boards the way they do. You know what I mean? That's why organizations stick by this process. So you don't, get a wild hair on draft night and deviate from your process and screw up. Like that's
Yeah.
something that can get a GM, like you're in your second or third year or whatever, you're not as established as Brad Holmes, and you reach for a position because you quote unquote need it, and then that player ends up not being a first round talent, like
Mm-hmm.
that's how you end up getting fired by an owner here in a couple of years, being like, well, you did this and you took this is bad. So like, I don't know. I'm right there with you,
Yep.
man. I think trust Brad. We're right there with you guys. Again, last time we'll say it, we would love an edge rusher. That would be perfect if we landed Michael Williams, something like that. Perfection. But you can't make that happen because like Miko laid it out. It's a premium position, man. It's edge rusher,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like everybody needs edge rusher. If you watch Brad Holmes' end of year press conference, he talked about how difficult it was to acquire Zadarius Smith because it's just not something that people want to give away. Like, hey, do you want to trade your best or second best edge rusher to us? Ours got hurt. Teams aren't going to be like, yeah, sure. There's just a bunch of those going around. There's not.
Well, and even if you feel like a team already has 2 good ones, right? Like, well, they already have 2 good ones. Yeah, you'd still would like a third one. You would
Sure.
still like a rotational dude that you can kind of just throw in there. So that's where the Lions really are going to have to really play the board. And it wouldn't surprise me, right? If a certain player gets within striking distance, Brad is not shy about trading up or things like that. So just because we're saying that, like, hey, there's a good chance that they wouldn't take an edge at the 8, there's also probably a chance that they would trade up if they felt like one was going to escape them if they weren't more aggressive. So speaking of that aggressiveness, or again, aggressiveness or being passive, whenever, like you were talking about it a minute ago, that the thing that can get a GM fired or can land them in hot water is reaching. Whether it's a player that's listed on Eric's mock draft roundup or just a player that you're kind of familiar with, is there anyone that you're just like, man, I really hope the Lions don't reach on this guy?
Yeah, I'm going to throw this name out there just because I've seen it from people. And I'm not a big Michigan fan. I went to Eastern Michigan University, so I'm not one of these guys that hates on Ohio State cats just because. But if I see one more person being like, the Lions should take Jack Sawyer at 28, I'm going to lose my freaking mind, okay? Come on now, guys. I don't want to. He could end up
Mm-hmm.
being a decent pro. He could have like a nice little long career, but in my opinion, and I've been wrong before, he is not capital N a first round talent. Okay, so that's something I think people need to let go. That's one that would make me mad. I'll be honest with you, and I don't see the Lions doing that. They're pretty big on their premium athletes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To leave that one where it is, and then I don't know. You touched on it earlier. The Mike Green thing, similar to the Pierce situation. There's stuff swirling about his character. I don't think anything has been officially like, like debunked. It's real, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's another one. There's some icky stuff out there about his off the field stuff, and it could be cleared up eventually. Who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, I just like a Sawyer one, like just reaching because like we talked about, like you need somebody because that's how you get in trouble, man. Like there's a clear, everyone always talks about that correlation. There's, if you take a edge rusher in the first round, there's just a much higher hit rate
Yeah.
just for that player panning out. There's exceptions here and there, like Trey Hendrickson and Max Crosby, but there ain't a lot of them. So it's just something to keep in mind. And yeah, the Sawyer thing, that blows my mind. I know there's a lot of Ohio State fans out there. I urge you guys to watch some NFL football and think about if Jack Sawyer's going to be that kind of player in the NFL, man. Right, Miko?
Listen, people are gonna think that we are anti-Ohio State. This is just like
No.
anti-Ohio State take, but like I'm right there kind of with you with Donovan Jackson. Like I don't think he's a bad player. I think he actually is a good guard, and I even did a film study of him, and I think he does play guard at a really high level, but not high enough for me to be drafted at 28 in the first round. I don't think he quite has the athletic profile to play guard the way the Lions expect their offensive linemen to play. And that's really like what it is. If you told me that the Lions were going to take him in the second round or maybe in the third round, I'd be more okay with it because I just think like, okay, that probably is where he's better suited. But end of the first round, giving him that flexibility to have that 5-year option and all that type of stuff, I'd pass personally.
Yeah, and I like Donovan Jackson as a prospect, but I would understand having hesitations taking him at 28. Again, it's like about the value, guys. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
no, we are not Ohio State haters, bro. Like I got a signed Taylor Decker thing right here. Well, I'm a
Love Decker.
Big CJ Stroud fan. I don't care as long if you can make the Lions better. You can come from Underwater Basket Weaving University. I do not care. Okay, so I want to get that out there. Go ahead.
No, man, I'm right there with you. So I think like when you start looking at this draft class as a whole, like I do, I think there's going to be really interesting. First and foremost, to see what the Lions do in the first round. I think there's going to be a lot of options available to them. I know a lot of people are going to we're going to have bated breath on whether or not it's going to be an edge rusher or their favorite edge rusher. But hopefully, what Morgan and I kind of laid out helps you kind of process the draft differently, helps you go into the draft, into the rest of this draft season, looking at things a little bit differently and understanding that, listen, things are going to be fairly fluid. Yes, the Lions do have big needs at edge. They still have a need at guard as well. We can sit here and debate about how severe that need is, but at the end of the day, the Lions are going to go into the draft. They're going to try and plug holes with some young, affordable talent that's going to help give them some cap flexibility for years to come so that they can sign some of your favorite current Lions now. So it's something to really keep in mind. And like I said, I do encourage you guys to go check out Eric's mock draft roundup so that you guys can kind of read first of all, what Eric thinks about some of these prospects, but also what some of these draft analysts are saying and why they think that they're a good fit for the Lions in the first place. I may sit here and say that I don't think Donovan Jackson is a good fit, but you may read the evaluation on Donovan Jackson and think like, yo, he's a perfect fit for what the Lions need. So definitely check that out when you have some free time. Anything else that I might have left out, Morgan?
No, I love that you threw that in there. And the mock draft roundup's good too because Eric does a lot of the work for you. Like you don't got to go click around on 40 different
Mm-hmm.
websites to look at the mock drafts. Like he literally tells you what their reasoning is, gives you his thoughts. It's a really comprehensive. So reading that will be, I think, a good exercise. And like, okay, what do people think? Like who's going to be around there and in play for the Lions at 28? Obviously, none of them are talking directly with Brad Holmes. At least I don't think so. So keep that in
Mm-hmm.
mind. But it's a good exercise to at least familiarize yourself with prospects that might be in that range because I've heard a lot from like, I listen to like Greg Rosenthal's podcast, like NFL Daily. That's a good one. Love that dude. Like you listen to it and the consensus is kind of, it's a deep draft, but there might not be a big difference between the caliber of player you get between say like 20 to 60. So
Yeah.
that's something. So think about that, right? Like there's a lot of quality players, but maybe not like, there's Travis Hunter, there's some elite dudes at the top that could end up being, all pros and that, that kind of thing. But if there's a big tier of players that are kind of interchangeable between picks 20 and 60, then buckle up because I think it's going to be all over the place, man. And that's just where we're at now. Like the days of the Lions picking at 6 and 7 or whatever. And you're like, okay, well, we know quarterbacks are going here and you can kind of narrow it down between like 2 or 3 players. Thankfully, those days are over. I don't miss them. I know none of y'all probably do either, but yeah.
I'd much rather have days like these. I'd much rather have these type of problems, right? I don't know who we're going to have at 28, but at least we're winning games.
We got uptown problems now, bro. Yeah, that's 100% right.
That's a good way of, that's problems. A really good way of putting it.
Yeah.
But that's going to pretty much do it for us, guys. For any more additional Lions content, like I said, go check out prideofdetroit.com. There's new articles being put up over there all the time. I actually saw some articles going up today. If you're really curious about how the Lions have been spending and like the cap situation between the offense and the defense, there's some new articles that are up about that I think are really, really insightful. So definitely go check those out. And like I said earlier, if you want to stay locked into the video content that we're doing over here on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell, drop us a comment because that helps us out as well and also gives us some feedback on what you guys thought of the video. And yeah, doing all of those things will make it easier for you to find our content, and it makes it easier for you to be notified when we upload new videos or decide to go live over here on YouTube. But with all that said, I'm Miko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.